It was a straightforward arrangement. 2 weeks in a sleep clinic at the university, monitored every night, and paid 4,000 kroner at the end. I was a second-year doctoral student, and my stipend that month hadn't covered everything it needed to. The study was looking at sleep architecture in people under sustained academic stress, which described pretty much everyone I knew. The room was small and white and smelled of antiseptic and something underneath that, something older, the smell of a building that had been sealed through many winters. There was a bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out onto a courtyard full of snow. They fitted me with electrodes each night around 10. The technician, a man called Anders, didn't say much, but he was efficient and not unkind. Then the lights went off and I slept. Or that was the understanding. The first week was fine. I slept well, actually, better than in my apartment, which had thin walls and a neighbor who kept odd hours. The researchers showed me my sleep graphs each morning over coffee. Deep sleep, REM cycles, all within normal ranges. They seemed pleased. I felt fine. There was nothing to report. The first thing I noticed was on the morning of day 9. My book, a paperback I'd been reading before lights out, was on the desk instead of the nightstand. I remembered leaving it on the nightstand, face down, with the pages bent to keep my place. It was now on the desk, face up and closed. The page I'd been on was lost. I mentioned it to Anders. He said I might have moved it during the night without remembering. He wrote something down. I didn't think much of it. On day 10, I checked my phone before handing it over for charging. My fitness app had logged 847 steps between 2:14 a.m. and 3:58 a.m. I'd been connected to monitoring equipment. I was supposed to have been asleep. I asked Anders about it, and he looked at his clipboard and said the monitoring showed no significant movement during that period. He said fitness apps sometimes misfired, especially with older phone models. He wrote something down again. I watched him write it. I asked to see my sleep footage that afternoon. They showed it to me on a laptop in a small meeting room. Me, sleeping. The camera was mounted in the corner, night vision giving everything that slightly greenish quality those recordings always seem to have. 7 hours of it, played it fast forward. I watched myself not moving. Peaceful, they said, completely normal. I asked them to slow it down at the section between 2 and 4 a.m. They paused. The researcher, a woman named Dr. Lindqvist, who I hadn't spoken to much, said that particular section had experienced a recording fault, a server issue. She pulled up the timestamps, 2 a.m., then 4:02 a.m., 2 hours and 2 minutes gone. Just gone. I asked what had happened during those 2 hours. She said the fault meant they had no data for that period. She said it was unfortunate and that it happened occasionally with older recording systems. She was very calm when she said it, professionally calm, the kind of calm that had been practiced. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought through what I knew. 847 steps between 2:14 and 3:58. A 2-hour gap in the footage starting at 2 o'clock. A book moved to the desk. Anders writing things down both times I mentioned something. Dr. Lindqvist's practiced calm. None of it proved anything. All of it pointed in the same direction. I decided to stay for the last 3 nights of the study. I needed the money, and I also, I'll be honest, needed to know. What I did was this. I hid my second phone, an old one I used as a backup, wedged behind the radiator in my room. I angled it to see as much of the room as possible. They had taken my main phone for charging, as usual. They hadn't found the backup. On the 3rd morning, I retrieved it. The footage from my phone showed me sleeping until 2:11 a.m. Then I sat up. Not like waking, not the slow emergence from sleep, not the confusion of someone jarred awake. I sat up cleanly, in one movement, like a mechanism releasing. I swung my legs off the bed. I stood. And then I began moving around the room in a way I can only describe as methodical. Opening the desk drawer, closing it, moving to the window, standing there for several minutes, looking out, moving back, picking up the book, replacing it on the desk. The worst part wasn't that I was walking around. The worst part was the last thing on the footage at 3:47 a.m. I was standing in the middle of the room, completely still, and then I turned, slowly, with no prompt, no sound, nothing, and looked directly at the camera behind the radiator, the one they didn't know about, the one I had hidden that evening. I left the next morning, told them I had a family emergency, took the money. I still took the money, and I'm not embarrassed about that, and went back to my apartment in Södermalm. I didn't tell them about the second phone. I didn't tell anyone about the footage. I deleted it 3 days later. I've thought since about whether that was the right thing to do. I think it was. I don't think it would have helped anyone to keep it. For the first week at home, I slept fine. I told myself it had been the environment, the monitoring, the electrodes, the knowledge of being observed, some stress response I hadn't been aware of, a sleep disorder that the clinical setting had triggered and that the familiar surroundings of my own apartment would resolve. I almost believed it. Then one morning I found the notepad from my desk on the nightstand. It had been on the desk when I went to sleep. I was sure of it. I'd been making notes from a paper I was reading. It was on the nightstand when I woke, open to a page that had been blank the night before, covered now in handwriting. The same phrase repeated, filling the whole page from top to bottom in neat columns. The handwriting looked like mine. The letter shapes, the pressure, the slight leftward lean I'd had since school. But I didn't recognize it. That's the only way I can describe it. It looked like my handwriting, and I did not recognize it. The phrase it had written over and over again, I won't repeat. It doesn't matter what it said. What matters is that I hadn't written it, and whatever had written it had used my hand to do so. I've been back to my normal sleep since then, mostly. I keep the notepad off the desk now. I put it in a drawer before bed. I don't keep a pen on the nightstand. Small adjustments. the kind you make when you can't solve the actual problem. I haven't contacted the university. I have no evidence anymore. And I think, honestly, that if I started asking questions, I'd get Dr. Lindqvist's calm, and I'd get Anders writing things down, and I'd get explanations that almost fit. I'd rather not know what almost fits. What I keep returning to is the moment on the footage, standing in the middle of the room, looking directly at a camera I had hidden that same evening, looking at it the way you look at something you already know is there. I've thought about what that means, whether whatever was awake in that room at 3 a.m. was more aware than I am when I'm conscious, whether it knew things I didn't, whether it still does,